All right. Hello there and welcome. Oh, my lighting is abysmal. I'm Andrea Klunder. I'm your podcast boss. This is a behind the scenes recording of an episode of Podcast Envy. So it is not a polished show in terms of being a polished live stream. Live stream is something that I have avoided for a while. I've been curious about. I've been thinking, is this a thing I want to do? Let's get this microphone in a good position where it's not casting a shadow on my face, but you can still hear me. Nope, I don't like that sound. I like it better when it's down here. All right, we gotta get close. This is behind the scenes of what it's like when I record my Podcast Envy episodes. And then this episode will get edited and polished up and released into my regular Podcast Envy feed after the fact. So this particular episode, I believe, is going to be February 23rd is when it'll be coming out in the Podcast Envy feed in your favorite podcast app. There will be an episode between the one that just recently released and the one that I'm recording today. That'll be episode 100. It has a special surprise for everyone in it, and that is super fun. So this whole live streaming of episodes behind the scenes, like I said, is an experiment. It's something that I wanted to try to see if I like doing. So if you are catching this episode recording on Facebook, YouTube, or LinkedIn, then I would love to hear your feedback to find out if this is something that is cool, if this is something that you enjoy, if it's something that's useful, something you want to see more of. Is there a better time of day to do it? I'm kind of just arbitrarily picking pockets in my schedule that I can actually do it. And there's no rhyme or reason to schedule as of yet. So I'd love some feedback. If you happen to be catching this live, feel free to put any comments that you wish, and I will respond to those. And even if you're watching this as a replay on social media, or if you are listening to the audio version of it later, I would love to hear any questions that you have for me related to podcasting. So this particular episode that I'll be recording is actually something that I call a Hey Andrea episode. And Hey Andrea episodes are those episodes where I actually am asking a real question that I have seen, heard, gotten, been asked, etc., with my point of view. So I need questions to do more Hey Andrea episodes. If you have a question for me about podcasting, let me know. You can email me, Andrea at thecreativeimposter.com. You can also DM me on your social media platform of choice. However, just keep in mind, like if we're not connected, if we're not already friends, sometimes those messages get sent into the hidden or message request folder and I don't always see them right away. So hold on one second. I did not want to cough in your ear. So that's what we've got cooked. So that's what we've got cooked up for you. Notice how when I'm nice and close to my microphone, it sounds great. And then when I back up here, it's super echoey. So I have to be more diligent about mic positioning. And this, folks, is why we wear headphones, so that we can monitor these things. All right. So without any further ado, let me get to my notes here. This one is a good one. It's kind of a juicy answer. So I want you to grab something to drink, a cup of coffee, a cup of tea, a cocktail, who knows, and settle in here for what is going to be a fun ride. Let me make my notes a little bigger. There we go. Let me put this on over here. All right. Here we go, our official episode recording. Welcome to Podcast Envy. I'm your podcast boss, Andrea Klunder, here to tell you what to do to create a successful, satisfying podcasting experience for you, your business, your organization, your brand, whatever the heck you're podcasting for. Today is a Hey Andrea episode, and that means that we have a real live question from a real live podcaster about a real live podcast, except that this podcaster hasn't released an episode in a while. Jeanette Bonner, producer and host of Hashtag Single, writes the following. I've phrased a little, but you'll get the gist of it. Her question is about podcast burnout. All right, that's fun. We have a little ticker tape going up on our live stream. Hey, Andrea, how do I get over podcaster's block? So that's the question. How do I get over podcaster's block? So I'm going to record that a little bit differently. Jeanette Bonner, producer and of Hashtag Single, writes the following. Hey, Andrea. Jeanette Bonner, producer and host of Hashtag Single, has the following question. How do I get over podcaster's block? So here's what she writes. Launched my podcast Hashtag Single in fall 2018. I don't have a team. It's just me doing everything from outreach to editing to social media. I don't have the funds to hire out. She then mentions that the podcast doesn't generate any income and specifies what she feels is a low number of downloads per episode, despite her best efforts to grow her audience. Back to Jeanette. After 4 years of constant producing, this past October, I had to take a break. She then goes on to provide reasons, life, schedule, projects, etc. Back to Jeanette. I don't know about you, but Back to Jeanette. I don't know about you. The amount of time required to execute my podcast professionally has ballooned since 4 years ago as our collective standards rise and competition for attention increases. The break was supposed to be a month, but it turned into 3. I swore I'd get back to it in January, but here we are at the end of January and I feel super stuck. Maybe because I took a 3-month break and I feel like no one even noticed. I'm not exactly sure what I need, but I would love your thoughts. Advice, resources on how to move forward. I can relate. Can you? This is me, Andrea, talking, not Jeanette. Whether you're podcasting on behalf of your own business, a company you work for, an organization, your personal brand, or a passion project, getting stuck is part of the cycle. And burnout, real hazard that many of us face at one time or another. So, Jeanette, number 1, you're not alone. Number 2, this episode is for you. And number 3, this episode isn't just for Jeanette. This episode is for all of us. But let me take a moment to pull this sticky bun of a question apart a little bit more because there's a few things that I think are going on here. Number 1, the part about not being able to delegate or hire a team due to the fact that your show does not generate an income due to the perceived low number of downloads that you're receiving. And Jeanette did put in her post how many downloads that is. So I do have that information. I'm just not sharing it publicly because I didn't expressly answer that, because I didn't expressly ask her to share her download numbers. And some people get sensitive about it. So we're not doing that. But suffice to say, Jeanette, your number isn't as low as you think it is. According to Libsyn, favorite podcasting host, in the month of November of 2022 until the end of December 2022, the median number of downloads that an average podcast, I don't want to say average, the median number of downloads that a podcast received after 45 days of being in the world was 152. What that means is that if your podcast is getting more than 152 downloads per episode in its first 30 to 45 days, your show's better than half of the shows that are out there. You're doing great. The other stat that I pulled out is that if your show is getting more than 1,200 downloads in the first 30 to 45 days, you're better than 80% of the shows. You are automatically in the top 20%. Of all the shows hosted by Libsyn and Libsyn Pro, which is one of the biggest podcast hosts, well, we'll talk about that another time. But of all the shows hosted on Libsyn and Libsyn Pro, which is a lot and is very representative of the industry, only 7.6% of them had 5,000 or greater downloads in that first 30 days. And that 5,000 number is the number that most, not all, but most advertisers are looking for in order to sponsor a show, which is important if having sponsored content where your podcast audience is the product that you're selling is your goal. Now, I don't really know this without talking to you, but I suspect, Jeanette, that this is not the reason why you are producing your show. And for most of the people in my audience, most of my clients, that is also not the primary goal, is to get sponsors with 5,000 or more downloads. So you, Jeanette, sit right about where most, not all, but most of my clients, and indeed also myself, sit, which is in the top 50% of podcasts in terms of number of downloads, but not quite the top 20%. So that's awesome if you are somewhere in that range without using paid promotion strategies, a PR campaign, without having a social media team, without having a major podcast network behind you, and without being a celebrity with a dedicated multi-channel audience already in existence other than your podcast. As to the question of monetization, if you did want to earn money for your show in order to be able to outsource certain aspects of it, make your process easier and less time intensive, there are other ways to go about doing that that don't require 5,000 downloads per episode and may not even require sponsors per se, but I don't think that's really your question, so I'm not going to get too much into that part of it. You're asking how to get back into producing your show when you are feeling resistance. Ugh, that word, resistance. So I would actually want to know a little bit more about where that resistance is coming from. There's two things in your post that really stick out to me. Number one, the amount of time required to execute my podcast professionally has ballooned since 4 years ago as our collective standards rise and competition for attention increases. And then number two, maybe because I took a 3-month break and I feel like no one even noticed? Let's take a look at the first one. The amount of time required to execute my podcast professionally has ballooned since 4 years ago as our collective standards rise and competition for attention increases. For one thing, the first thing that comes to mind is when I see that our collective standards rise and competition for attention increases is great. That means the industry, the platform, the medium is growing, which is fantastic news for anyone who's part of it, and especially someone who's been part of it for a while, because we have that extra history, we have that extra juice, we have that extra mojo, that extra longevity, that extra perspective, like whatever it is. It's a good thing, but it can be frustrating. Now, I've listened to a couple episodes of #single, and I have a feeling that you're the type of person who is highly creative, intrinsically motivated to make stuff, and also naturally oriented to quality. You don't want to just put the minimum viable product out there and call it. You pay attention to detail, to sound quality, to your content calendar, to the experience your listener is having, to the experience that your guests are having. You want to take advantage of every opportunity and resource that's available to make your show and your show experience the very best it possibly can be. And you probably have a higher standard than most for the work that you create. I understand this thinking. Yes, podcasting world has definitely grown and changed and expanded and replicated so much since 2018. Heck, I started my first show, The Creative Imposter, in 2015 with a very basic technological understanding of media production that I learned in college in the late 1990s. So totally different from what's available now. I had little to no idea about social media. I'm pretty sure I didn't even have an Instagram account at that time. And now I have clients who are asking me about geo-targeting ad spend for their show, video live streaming, accessibility and inclusion practices, private podcast feeds, international reach. It's enough to this cornucopia of what is out there is massive, and it's easy to get crushed under the feeling of all of the I could be doings turning into I should be doings. It personally makes me want to curl up under the covers and never reach my laptop ever again. Now, this may sound like I'm giving advice to just Jeanette specifically about her show and about available for hashtag single, but really this advice is for everyone. So I want you to listen when I say, how can you simplify or automate the work of producing your show? This is a question that other people and other coaches have asked me about my show, my business, my life, whatever. I'm not great at answering it, but I'm getting better at asking it. How can you simplify or automate the work of producing your show? I have once heard this call, something that I will never forget, which is the dump, delegate, defer. Let me pause here for a sip of water. All right. How can you simplify or automate the work of producing your show? I once heard this called, and I will never forget this as long as I live, the 3Ds: dump, delegate, defer. Let's start with dump. This one might be my hardest one. I'm not sure. We'll play a game and see which one is your hardest one. You can vote. Dump. What can you actually just stop doing or let go of the expectation of having to do? Sometimes I think we have to be posting content to all the social media platforms all the time, every time we have a new episode, and then also in between episodes. We need in-depth, elegantly written show notes for our website with timestamps of content, clickable links, pull quotes, and more. We need a poetic introduction to each episode and multiple segments with music stingers in between. We need to record a poetic, thoughtful, insightful introduction to each episode and include multiple segments with lovely music stingers in between. We should be a guest on other people's shows to grow our own audience. We should provide edited, well-formatted transcripts of every episode. We should have a Facebook group for our show to engage our community in conversation and connection. We should put our podcast on IMDb. Yeah, that's a thing now. What I mean to say here is there's a lot of stuff you could be doing, and there's probably a lot of things that you feel like you should be doing that might not actually be moving the needle forward towards the goals that you have for your show. So make a list of everything that you currently do for and around your podcast and all of the things you feel like you should be doing that you aren't, and then ask for each one, does this really need to happen? What if I just stopped doing it? If it does need to happen and I can't stop doing it, or I don't really want to stop doing it, can I simplify the process? Maybe I don't stop creating show notes altogether. I don't recommend having no show notes, but maybe I stop using timestamps and pull quotes. Maybe I realize that interview episodes take longer to produce than solo shows. Even though I really love doing interviews and connecting with my guests, I might mix up my content calendar a little bit and add some simpler episodes that are faster and easier to create. Maybe I forget about being on all of the social media platforms and just focus on my favorite one for a while. That's number one, dump. D number two, delegate. Maybe this is actually my hardest one. We talked about outsourcing not being an option at this time for you, Jeanette, but brilliantly delegating doesn't need to be to a paid human. Generally, editing and social media tend to be two of the biggest pain points in a podcaster's workflow. In some cases, there may be an automation available through a free or inexpensive software that can save you time and trouble and heartache. For example, using Descript has been a total game changer in my production process. I even discovered Descript like way in the beginning time of they even discovered Descript way in the beginning time of them even existing. I was literally in a coffee shop in Chicago and I was having a conversation with some other creative women, and I was talking about podcast editing and how much editing I had to do, and I was so overwhelmed, and somebody randomly overheard my conversation that had discovered Descript and started using it and was like, "Hey, I heard your conversation. Have you ever heard this tool?" And dun, 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 years later, it is one of my favorite podcasting tools. For a small monthly or annual subscription, AI will transcribe my episodes, not perfectly, but fast, and remove many common filler words that every time I say filler words, it makes me put a filler word, this psychological thing. And removes many common filler words like that I would typically manually remove or minimize from my episodes during the editing process. Again, it doesn't do this perfectly, but fast. And most importantly, I can do some of my content editing visually by reading the transcript and editing it like a Google Doc rather than by listening to every second of the audio and interpreting the waveform in a traditional DAW, which is a digital audio workstation. And if I wanted to, I could even have Descript do some of the basic level sound quality processing on my file. When I do use automation for that step of the process, I actually prefer a service called auphonic.com, but that is a whole other conversation that we're not getting into here. Suffice to say, there are a lot of automation tools out there that can make your editing process faster, less painful, easier, more enjoyable. Also, does your hosting company provide social media integrations, and are you taking full advantage of them? I know our preferred host, Libsyn, can cross-post episodes to Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, SoundCloud, Tumblr. Is anyone still using Tumblr? It's simple to set up these automations, and while maybe it's not like the best way to engage on a platform like Twitter, it's better than nothing. And it requires so little time and effort, it's totally worth it. So in this process, even though I'm not delegating these things to a team member, to a human, I am delegating them to my software. Number 3, defer. Going back to all the things we could be doing to create and grow our podcast, can you make a list of all of the things that you want to do or could do, and then say, this is a great idea. I'm a genius for thinking of this, but I'm not going to do it right now. Maybe, if you really want to, look at your calendar and schedule a time in your calendar to come back to this idea and revisit it at that time. Maybe by the time you come back to it, there's an easier way to do it, a new piece of software and automation that exists. Maybe you have more time and bandwidth at that moment. Maybe somehow you figured out a way to be able to hire a team member to delegate it to. And maybe you realize that you really don't want to do that thing at all anymore, and it can just go in the dump pile. And so those are the 3 Ds of making your process simpler, which is see what you can dump, delegate, or defer. And now let's go back to the golden line in your post. Maybe because I took a 3-month break and I feel like no one even noticed. Jeanette, this gets to the heart of what I suspect you're experiencing resistance. You're an actor and a producer. You thrive on interaction, on collaboration, on feedback, on audience response. I totally get this because I have a theater and performance background. I feel this one so hard. Podcasting is weird for people like us because it's a time deferred medium and you are often doing parts of it completely by yourself. You see that you have downloads in your hosting software, which means that you have an audience, which means theoretically that people are listening. They're not all bots, but it can be so hard to actually get feedback. But it can be so hard to actually get feedback from your listeners. And it's nothing personal. I have tons of shows I listen to regularly that are an important part of my life, of my day. I think about the host. I hear their voice in my head when I'm making decisions of a particular thing. I value their content so much, and I do miss it when it's not there. But in most cases, those podcast hosts never, never, never know because I have never reached out to tell them. Believe me when I say that your audience noticed when you were gone and they missed you. And they would be thrilled to see a new episode of Hashtags in their podcast app, even if they never once have interacted with you. One thing I personally love about Hashtag Single though is how you create a safe, comfortable container for disclosure, for candid conversations. You really have a way of evoking a sense of camaraderie with your guests and with your listeners. It's entertaining to listen to, which makes sense given your background. And I feel included when I'm listening. I feel like I'm a part of the conversation. So, based on that, based on my experience of listening to your episodes, I'm going to guess that connection is a huge value for you. And bringing up values gets to my main advice, which actually isn't me telling you what to do, but is me asking you a ton of questions. And this gets my main advice, which is not me telling you what to do, but me asking you a bunch of questions. These questions, again, are not just for Jeanette, but for every human making a podcast right now. Are you ready? Okay. Why did you start your podcast in the first place? Do you remember? What change did you want to offer your listeners? So many of us, I'm not going to say most, I'm not going to say all, but many of us start a podcast because we believe that we can be of service or that we can be helpful or that we can add something to a conversation or that we can provide something that no one else is providing in our particular niche. Also, we start a podcast because there's something that we want to get from it, right? Humans are selfish. Let's face it. Even when we're selfless, we're also selfish. Anyways, I digress. So, what change did you want to offer your listeners? And what did you want to get out of putting in the time, effort, money, and heart into creating your show? Did producing your show during the 4 years that you've been producing it, did producing your show meet those needs at the time? Are those needs still relevant? Is that still your why, or has your why shifted and changed? Do you even still need those things? Are those are those needs that you originally had when you started the show being met by something else in your life? Are you serving your community in a different way aside from creating the podcast? Okay. So then if that's the case. What do you want to offer to your audience now? Same audience, same people. Maybe those audience members have been with you for a while and they also have grown and changed along with you. So, what do you want to offer them now? What do you want to get out of producing your show now? Let me give you an example so it's a little more tangible. I originally started The Creative Imposter back in 2015 because I had closed my previous business, which had nothing to do with podcasting. I was broke. I was depressed. I didn't know what to do next. I didn't really feel like doing much of anything. Listening to podcasts was just about the only thing that I actually felt like doing. And some previous clients had suggested that maybe I should get into podcasting at some point in time. And so it was like this little idea in the back of my head. And it felt like something that I could do with the resources that I had. So I set about creating a show asking people that I admired and that I wanted to spend time with the thing that I was feeling right then, which was like I was a fraud or an imposter, hence the creative imposter, that I was an imposter to the creative entrepreneurial role that I had imagined and created for myself, had crashed and burned with my last business. I didn't know how to make a business out of podcasting. I didn't know how to grow an audience. I barely knew how to create thing, and I didn't do it exactly right the first time and had to make a bunch of changes, but that's a story for another time. Now, that has nothing to do with where I am anymore. I mean, it does because it's my backstory, but now that is not where I am anymore. Thank God. So that show is on a hiatus because I don't actually have a clear vision of what I need or what the why is for me right now creating that podcast. The creative imposter is not dumped, but it is deferred. I may come back to it when the time is right, and it will probably look different when I do that because it will be fulfilling a different purpose for me and for my audience, who hopefully has grown a lot else since 2015. Which brings me to some more questions. Why do you want to resume your podcast? Let me ask that again. Why do you want to resume your podcast? Wait, okay, back up. Do you want to resume? Or do you feel like you should resume? You said you were going to take a break, thought you were going to come back in January. You didn't come back in January, but you feel like you should because you said you would. But do you actually want to? Do you actually want to? Here's permission right now. It's okay to close your show. It's okay to close your show forever. It's okay to close the show for now and leave it open-ended as to maybe you'll resume at some point in the future. And if that's the case, closing it forever or closing it for now, ideally, since we have established that you do have listeners, they do miss you, maybe just let them know in a short, sweet, entertaining bye forever or bye for now episode. Hey, invite them to follow you or connect with you on your next big project or on your favorite social media platform. I do have an example of this that I love. Rose Eveleth of Flash Forward, which is a show about the future that I have been listening to forever, just closed that show after many, many years. And she did it in a really elegant and heartfelt way. So check out the Flash Forward feed to see how she did it. I'm sad that the show is over, but I also feel a satisfying sense of closure and will probably continue to pay attention to whatever she does in the future. So now, permission to close your show forever or for now, but assuming you do really want to reopen the show, why? I know I keep asking this question. The high school students I work with hate that I'm always asking why. It's pretty annoying. But anyways, why? What do you want to get out of resuming your show now? Is it the same show that you want to resume? Is hashtag single the same show that you want to resume, or do you want to do something different? Is it still hashtag single? Is it something else? So you could be looking at a different format, different topics, a whole new rebrand. You can literally change anything about your podcast at any point that you want. And my advice is, as long as it still serves the same audience you initially attracted to your podcast feed, maybe an audience, as I mentioned, that has grown and changed with you, you can keep your new version, new iteration, new brand of your show, new name, new cover art, new name, new cover art, new music, new format. You can keep all of that on your podcast feed. Maybe you want to be crazy and add a new co-host. Anything, literally the sky is the limit. Saying literally the sky is the limit is kind of an annoying use of that phrase. I'm not going to say that. Okay. Maybe you want to do something really wild and add a co-host to your show. The sky is the limit. So, in looking at what you might want to change up for your show, what would have to be different from before to make it feel enjoyable and exciting? What are you curious about now? What would you like to experiment with? These live streams of Podcast Envy are a perfect example. Podcast Envy had a hiatus for sip of water. Recording episodes of Podcast Envy as a live stream like I'm doing right now are a perfect example. Podcast Envy had a hiatus for almost a year. My why hadn't changed, but I got busy with growing my business, buying my first condo, and producing the show had moved to my should-do list rather than my want-to-do list. I wasn't really excited about it anymore, but I was feeling kind of guilty about the fact that I'm a podcast consultant, strategist, and producer, and I wasn't producing my own podcast. So now that I have a little bit more time in my schedule, I'm experimenting with recording episodes live on video to spice it up, to see what's different, to see what I like about it. And I'm also coming back to a format that I had used in the past called Hey Andrea. That episode format felt more exciting and easier to produce than doing a bunch of interviews. And so, well, here we are. Going back, Jeanette, to your point about feeling like no one missed your show while you were gone. Going back, Jeanette, to your about feeling like no one missed your show while you were gone. Is there a way that you can invite more interaction, connection, and dialogue with your audience? So for all listeners, this goes back to figuring out what it is that you want to get out of the show. What is the why? If it's fulfilling a need for connection, that's one thing. If you're building community, that's another thing. If you're growing your professional network, that's another thing. If you're establishing a platform for thought leadership, that's another thing. If you're marketing a business for a product service you sell, that's another thing. Everyone has a different fundamental need that the podcast is meant to serve. And so figuring out what that need is, what it is that you value from creating the podcast, and then figuring out how can you get more of that with the tactics and strategies that you implement with your show. So back to Jeanette, is there a simple, fun way that would be worth it to you to experiment with, and then be consistent and patient, because it takes time to train your audience into a new habit. So is there a way that you can invite more interaction, connection, dialogue with your audience if that is in fact what you are looking for and what would feed your soul? I'm not telling you to do any of the following things I'm going to list. There are ways that you might go about doing that. They work well for some folks and not at all for other folks. But off the top of my head, could you create a Patreon community that would not only create a platform for interacting with your audience and getting feedback, but it can also create an opportunity for monetization? Could you do a listener survey? Could you try doing a live stream on a social media platform? Could you invite listeners to attend a private Ask Me Anything Zoom session? Could you set up a Discord server, a Facebook group, a Mighty Network group? Could you in your episodes explicitly ask your listeners for questions on a certain topic or stories around a particular theme, and ask regularly on every episode, and then give them a super easy way to do that? You could use a service like SpeakPipe. You could create a Google Voice number, use a simple Google form with 2 to 3 questions. I did notice from looking at your show notes that there aren't very many links And for some of the episodes, there's no links at all. There's no website referenced. In order to even find a web for you, I had to do a Google search for the podcast name, and then your hosting website on the Podbean platform came up. Also on your show notes, I should say, also in your show notes, I couldn't really see a clear call to action unless the call to action was directing the listener to your guest's material or your guest's webpage. So if I listen to your show and I love your show and I want to interact more, I want to be more a part of the community, and I click over to your show notes, I don't actually know how to do that. I don't know how to connect with you or how to interact with the show, even if I wanted to put forth the effort to do that. So I am wondering, do you have a website other than the Podbean website? Do you have a landing page, an email list? I don't want to go back to adding to the overwhelm of all of the things you could/should be doing, but I want to pick something that feels right and would be rewarding to you to try. Make it clear what you want me as a listener to do as a result of listening to your episode, why I should do it, and then make it super easy for me to do that. So I think in summary from here, your options are 3. 1, keep the show basically the same, but look for ways to simplify, dump, delegate, defer. See that weakens your resistance and you're able just to slide right back into #single the way that you were producing it before, but with a little bit more ease. Number 2, make a few experimental changes that feel aligned with your current why and feel exciting for you, or do a full-on rebrand to switch up the energy. Option number 3, close the show, close it forever, close it for now, and be okay with that decision. You can always come back to your show later when it feels easier or more exciting, or you could totally start something new. You're your own boss. When it comes to podcasting, for the most part, there's almost nothing you really have to do if you don't want to do it. And generally, the way you're doing it can change. There's always another way. So no matter what you choose, keep the show but simplify, make some changes, spice it up, make it more exciting, or close the show and be okay. I'm sure you're happy. No matter what you choose to do, I'm sure your listeners are going to be super happy to hear from you. I think I moved when I said that. No matter what you choose, I'm sure your listeners are going to be super happy to hear from you in their podcast app. So that is, viewers, the official end of the episode. This is probably the longest solo episode I have ever done. Probably should have been a masterclass. But there you have it. It was a good question, and so many people have this question in some way, shape, or form. I have experienced it myself. I've given advice about it. I've gotten advice about it. There's a lot of really great coaches out there who have some insights as well. This was originally posted on a Facebook thread inside the She Podcasts group, which I highly recommend for anyone who identifies as being a she podcaster or anyone who identifies as being a non-binary individual, gender fluid, et cetera, et cetera. And that group is a really supportive place. There was a lot of great comments and advice that were given on that thread as well. I asked Jeanette for permission to be able to use her in her show for this episode, even though she did not expressly reach out to me and ask me, but I just thought it was such a great question. And I really liked her show and thought that this would be a good example that a lot of us could learn from. So before we say goodbye, there's one more thing I need to do. And that is to record my Podcast Angel segment for the audio episode. And then during the editing, I'll stick this somewhere in the middle of the episode. While I don't take sponsorships on this show, Podcast Angels are those products and opportunities that I personally have used and love and recommend for you to sweeten your podcasting experience. Sometimes it's my own stuff that I'm offering, masterclasses, services, coaching sessions, what have you. And sometimes it's third party software, etc. So here we go. And now it's time for our podcast angels. Podcast angels are those products, services, and opportunities that I have used, love, and recommend for you to sweeten your podcasting experience. Sometimes I'm offering, nope, I'm not going to say that part. And since we've been talking about delegating to software, I am going to be introducing you to 5 angels that can help you do just that and will offer me a referral incentive as an affiliate for introducing you to them. Don't skip this section. It's going to go quick. All of the affiliate links for the Creative Imposter Studios for these services are in the show notes for your episode and at thecreativeimposter.com/faves, Faves. Please use my link when you sign up so they know you. All right, here we go. Angel number 1, if you are just launching your podcast or ready for a change, Libsyn is our podcast host of choice and can automate posting your episodes to Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, and more. You can get 2 months free with the promo code ENVY, and that's Libsyn, Libsyn. Podcast angel number 2, Squadcast, my hands down favorite platform for recording remote interviews, audio or video. And they have automation options for improving your audio quality. Get a 7-day free trial with my link at thecreativeimposter.com/squadcast. Podcast angel number 3 is Descript, my pick for fast and easy DIY editing, transcripts, and more. That sounded weird. Podcast angel number 3 is Descript, my pick for fast and easy DIY editing, transcripts, and more. Free trial at thecreativeimposter.com/Descript. That's DESCRIPT. True story. I once recommended Descript to a podcaster at a conference. It was a total game changer for her. It was a total game changer for her life, and we've been pod friends ever since. ConvertKit, podcast angel number 4. ConvertKit for landing pages and email campaigns. You can connect your podcast feed to ConvertKit and they will draft an email for you for every new episode you release. Plus, you can even create a tip jar for your audience to support your show. 14-day free trial at thecreativeimposter.com/ConvertKit. And podcast angel number 5, last but certainly not least, Headliner. Headliner for automated audiograms. Say that 5 times fast. Automated audiograms for social media. If your podcast host does not have an integration to publish your episodes to YouTube, wah wah, but never fear, Headliner's here. Check it out at thecreativeimposter.com/headliner. Again, all of the links to all of these 5 podcast angel tools and resources are in the show notes for the episode and at thecreativeimposter.com/faves. If you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, I'll link them in the replay description or in the comments. And last but not least, I have a bonus podcast angel. This has literally never happened in my life. Bonus podcast angel for all of you watching this on social media. The service I am currently using right now in this moment to stream to Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube all at the same time is StreamYard. You guessed it. Sign up to try it out You guessed it. Sign up to try it out at thecreativeimposter.com/StreamYard. All right, everybody, that is my official end to my recording. It was a long one. It was a good one. It was jam-packed full of really good advice, if I do say so myself. Thank you so much for watching this on social media, and I will connect with you soon. If you have a question for me that you would like me to answer, please send it my way. You can email me, Andrea at thecreativeimposter.com, or you can try to DM me and let's see if the social media gods actually let your message get through.